Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The All England Tennis Club have decided to ban players from Russia and Belarus from the Wimbledon tournament, even though they're there to represent themselves and not a team on behalf of their countries. Is this right? We'll debate. Prince Harry does a big exclusive interview with an American TV station. He says he popped into Windsor to make sure the Queen was being looked after properly. What a lucky lady she is to have a grandson like that. And joining me on Talking Pints, a former Olympic gymnast, Lisa Mason. But before all of that, let's get the news.
Good evening, I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. It's believed Russia's deadline for Ukrainian troops to surrender in Mariupol has passed, with a commander in the besieged city warning his forces could survive just days or even hours. At least 1,000 people are said to be sheltering at a steel plant, which is the last Ukrainian stronghold in the southeastern port city. President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's ready to swap Russian prisoners to secure their safe passage. Well, President Zelensky also met the head of the European Council, who's in Kiev, to show his solidarity. Charles Michel says the EU has so far given the country £1.25 billion worth of military aid. The pair also discussed further sanctions against Moscow, as well as Ukraine's application for EU membership. Meanwhile, Russia has test-launched a new addition to its nuclear arsenal. The Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile is said to be capable of overcoming anti-missile defence systems. President Putin says it will give those who threaten Russia something to think about. The Pentagon says it was notified ahead of the launch and the routine test isn't considered a threat to the US. Prince Harry has revealed he may not return to the UK for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Speaking to NBC News' Today programme, the Duke of Sussex said security issues and everything else, as he put it, may keep him away. Harry and his wife Meghan met the Queen on their way to the Invictus Games last week. He told the show he'd wanted to make sure Her Majesty was protected.
It's just so nice to see her. You know, she's on great form. She's always got a great sense of humour with me, and I'm just making sure that she's, you know, protected and got the right people around.
Well, you make her laugh. That's what she always says. Did you do it again?
Yes, yeah, I did. Both Meghan and I had tea with her, so it was really nice to catch up with her. And you know, home for me now is you know, for the time being, it's in the States.
The Rust movie production company linked to the fatal shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins has been fined over £100,000. She was killed on the movie set in October last year after a prop gun, which actor Alec Baldwin was holding, was discharged. A report into the incident found the production company knew that firearms safety procedures were not being followed on set and demonstrated plain indifference to employee safety. Johnny Depp has claimed he was the victim of domestic violence in his marriage to Amber Heard. The Hollywood actor has been testifying in the $50 million defamation case he's brought against his former wife. But her lawyers say he was physically abusive to her and are bringing a counterclaim against him. Johnny Depp detailed to the court how his ex-wife slapped and shoved him during arguments.
Did I myself reach the point of striking Miss Heard in any way, nor have I ever struck any woman.
The Kremlin says a ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes at this year's Wimbledon is unacceptable. World number 2, Daniil Medvedev and Aryna Sabalenka, ranked number 4, will now not be part of the draw for this year's competition. Organisers say it's with sadness they will be excluding the athletes in protest at their country's actions in Ukraine. Well, on TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Back now to Nigel.
Good evening. Aren't sanctions a funny old thing? You know, we talk in the West about sanctions, and yet we continue, I say we, I mean the Germans really, continue to pay Russia nearly $1 billion a day for gas and oil. But of course, in this country, we've taken things rather more seriously. The All England Tennis Club, yes, the hosts of the annual Wimbledon tennis competition, have decided today, in their infinite wisdom, that they will ban male and female competitors from Russia and Belarus from taking part in the tournament at all. The French Open haven't taken that opinion. And I just wonder about all of this because, of course, they've got some really rather good players. Daniil Medvedev, well, he's a rather good player. He's the second-ranked seed currently in the world. He got through to the 4th round of Wimbledon last year. And Aryna Sabalenka, the female player, got through to the semi-finals last year. And there are other very good Russian and Belarusian players. Is it right that they're banned from taking part in Wimbledon? Well, here's my thought on it. This is not the Olympics. This is not the Davis Cup. These players are not representing their country, they're representing themselves. They just happen to come from a country that is not in favour at the moment. And we can go back through history and we can find national representative teams being banned from all sorts of events. In modern times, I can think of no parallel. Think back to when South Africa was shut out of world cricket, shut out of world rugby, yet Gary Player, who was South African, continued to play in the British Open, continued to play on the US tour, because he was there representing himself, not representing the nation that he came from. And I just think we're taking this way too far. If we start to ban individuals on the basis of their nationality, dare I say it, even their race, where does this all end up? I think this is over the top. I think it's wrong. And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter whether these players condemn the invasion of Ukraine or not. Some will, some won't. Imagine if you're a sports player, you want to play in Wimbledon, your mum and dad are getting on a bit, living in Moscow. Are you really going to condemn the Putin regime and put them in danger? And actually, should anybody ever ask you to be in that position? So I am really, really disturbed by this. I think it's wrong. I think it's over the top. And as I say, all the while the Germans keep on buying huge amounts of gas and oil. What does it all mean? I think the All England Club have got this wrong. I want to know what you think, please. Tell me, is it right? Is this right to ban these tennis players? Farage at gbnews.uk. I don't expect there to be any shortage of opinions coming in. Well, joining me to debate this, to discuss this, is Amanda Owens, leading sports and performance psychologist and former tennis player. I do understand that after World War II, there was a short ban on German players, but that's kind of 75, 80 years ago. Yep. I cannot think, can you, in modern times, of any precedent, any parallel to this?
No, not in the modern game, no. However, I mean, I think it's a very strong stance, obviously, by the All England, and they're sort of leading the way, because obviously the WTA and the ATP have stated that they don't wish to prevent players from competing. The stance that the All England have done and reportedly have made, I think is very important for... I think obviously it's a political statement, and yes, it does impact players professionally, because they're there for their professional gain and to earn money, but also for the love of the sport. So it's I personally think it's for the right reasons. I think it's a very brave and it's a very strong step by the All England. However, it does grey the area here between, obviously, sport and politics.
Well, what comes next? I mean, for example, there are many who are critical of some of Israel's actions. You know, could this mean in future we start banning Israeli players? Or would that lead to charges of anti-Semitism? I just don't know. I mean, I get it when it's a national team. I would get it if it was Davis Cup, where the tennis players are representing their country.
Yeah.
Isn't this just a bit too far?
I think it's really tricky here. I mean, obviously, I'm trying not to sit on the fence. I think very difficult.
You're giving a very good impression.
But I think it's, we haven't really been faced with this in tennis before. I think, we've got atrocities happening over in Ukraine.
How is that the fault of Daniil Medvedev?
Well, it's the IOC, you see, have taken a stance, as you know, that they've stating quite clearly that athletes should be banned from competing. I think other sports as well have taken a strong stance. Tennis have not.
The French Open.
Yes.
The French Open, which will precede Wimbledon by, 3 or 4 weeks or something like that.
Yes.
The French Open will allow these players to compete.
No, absolutely. And however, obviously the All England have made the stance. And as I said earlier, the WTA and the ATP have stated as well that they don't wish to prevent players from competing. I think it's a very difficult call to make here.
One of the reasons given was that they're really worried that Medvedev will win. Because
he most probably would, yes.
Because on grass, he's and it's a slightly different game, obviously. And what they wouldn't want is a member of the royal family handing over the trophy, but they could just get someone else to do it, couldn't they?
Absolutely. But I think it's the meaning. There's been an issue within gymnastics regarding one Russian athlete, and I think it's a preventative measure here that it could create a political storm. And I think as well with what's going on in Ukraine, it's incredibly sensitive, and indeed, we're seeing awful, dreadful.
I'm not disputing. I'm not disputing that at all. I'm not disputing that for one moment. I think to take it out on individuals like this is, as I say, I've never seen it before. I quote the example of Gary Player, but there were many other individual sportsmen and women from South Africa that were still allowed to compete on the world stage. Nothing like this has happened in modern times. I wonder what the tennis-loving public will make of it. It's going to be very interesting, isn't it? I think there's going to be a huge debate. It's going to be very divisive. As a former player myself, it's a very difficult call to make. And of course, it's your professional earnings, it's your living. And it's Wimbledon.
Yes, absolutely. But Medvedev, without a doubt, I mean, he was favourite, and I think he would have gone on to win it. And it's going to be a huge shame for tennis that he's not competing. Well,
I don't know. We have. Novak couldn't play in the Australian Open despite having won it 9 times previously on vaccine rules. Now we have this. Tennis, it seems, and global politics are now intertwined very deeply. I know, they need to be a bit more consistent, perhaps. I mean, that's something that perhaps tennis needs to look at. But the All England, one has to applaud the fact that they've taken a very strong stance, but it's all right. Well, unprecedented. Amanda, you've made the case. You've supported the strong stance taken by the All England Tennis Club. I don't agree at all. I know you don't. But we've disagreed in a very civil way, and I thank you very much indeed. And I'm looking forward to getting your views back at home. Is this right? I don't believe it is. Amanda takes a different view. One thing for certain, this is going to run and run and run right up until, during and after Wimbledon. Now, Prince Harry, of course, as we know, flew across from America to the Netherlands to open the Invictus Games. It's been one of his great achievements, and of that there is no doubt at all. We learnt subsequently that he popped into Windsor to see the Queen. Fine, that's great. I'm very pleased that he went to see his grandmother. After all, he couldn't even be bothered, could he, to turn up for the remembrance service for his grandfather. And I'm one of those people who thinks he happens to have treated the Queen with the most incredible level of disrespect over the course of the last couple of years, beginning, of course, with that appalling interview with Oprah Winfrey. But Harry's done a big exclusive with NBC's Today Show, and he says he's popped in to make sure she's got the right people around her. And he says, I'm just making sure she's protected. Oh, isn't the Queen oh so lucky to have a grandson as caring and as wonderful as Harry. And if you detect a little hint of sarcasm in my voice, well, you wouldn't be getting it wrong. I wonder what the reaction from the royal commentators is to all of this. I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by Ingrid Seward, royal commentator and editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine and author of Prince Philip Revealed, which is out now. Ingrid, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Maybe you thought my introduction was too sarcastic and too over the top, but it seemed to me he hasn't really given a damn for his grandmother's feelings over the course of the last 2 years. And now to go on American TV and to act in this way, it's quite extraordinary. Should we just have a look at a quick clip, Ingrid, of him on that NBC show?
How did it feel being back? Being with her?
Being with her, it was great. It was just so nice to see her. You know, she's on great form. She's always got a great sense of humour with me, and I'm just making sure that she's, you know, protected and got the right people around.
Well,
her.
you make her laugh. That's what she always says. Did you do it again?
Yes, yeah, I did. Both Megan and I had tea with her, so it was really nice to catch up with her. And you know, home for me now is you know, for the time being, it's in the States, and it feels that way as well.
Does it?
Yeah. We've been welcomed with open arms, and it's got such a great community up in Santa Barbara. So
you feel like that's home more for you?
Yeah.
Ingrid, how did the interviewer know that the Queen says that Harry always makes her laugh? Do tell.
Well, obviously, Harry had told her that. I mean, because Harry is promoting Invictus Games, and as you said earlier, it is his baby, and we all think that he's done a brilliant job with it. But he's obviously got to give something. He can't just, you know, this is American television after all. They're not going to just take a few platitudes. They want a bit more. So when they were chatting pre-interview, he obviously said, well, you know, the Queen, you know, Her Majesty and I laugh a bit together. She's got a great sense of humour. Why on earth he had to then add that he was, you know, concerned about, you know, who was looking after her and if she had the right people around her. I mean, Harry was doing so well, and then he goes and blows it by making a really extraordinary statement. And I think everyone, you know, love Harry or hate Harry, would agree with you and me that it was a very, very strange thing to say and bound to irritate those at the palace, you know. But I suppose Harry's, you know, he's always feels persecuted, Harry. And I think he's obviously wanted to get his oar in, you know, I'm her grandson, you know, you're mere minions, and I'm going to say what I think. That's how I read it anyway.
Yeah, and of course, on this visit, he's had a Netflix film crew with him for most of it, hasn't he? I mean, they are actually using his connection with the Queen to try and make a lot of money out of a film, aren't they?
Well, I think, you know, if it wasn't for Harry's connection, if Harry wasn't who he was, he wouldn't, you know, he wouldn't be anywhere near where he is now. But I think the Queen is very canny, Nigel. She knows exactly what Harry's up to. But she's also very forgiving. She's a very Christian woman, and she doesn't want to make enemies of her grandson. She is very fond of him, and I think she probably does find him very amusing. And what would be the point of not receiving him for tea? I mean, tea is quite a formal meal for the Queen. It always has been. There would be no point in not receiving Harry and Meghan. She just says it with a smile, and she's very wise, and we don't know what she thinks, but I have a fairly good idea. She knew exactly what Harry was up to.
Yeah, look, I quite understand. Of course you want to see a grandson time. I completely get that. Ingrid, a final thought. I mean, the Jubilee, this great big Platinum Jubilee, is really just a few weeks away now. We understand that Harry and Meghan will be welcome and will be on the balcony. Is that the right thing in your view?
I think they would be welcome, and the Queen has offered the olive branch, you know, please come. But then Harry himself said he wasn't sure if they were going to come because he's got some issues with the government about his security. So he's in litigation with the British government, and so it might put him in a very awkward position if he was suddenly to turn up with his family demanding sort of 100% security wherever he goes. So I think Harry is hedging his bets.
It's going to be very interesting to find out. They're always in the news. Ingrid Seward, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Well, we'll see where that one goes, particularly with the Jubilee. I have to say, I think that interview, I think his comments are perfectly appalling. But then I've always thought that about him, I have to say. Energy bills. We talked a little bit about this last night. I said I wanted GB News to be involved in a campaign. It seems to me that when we're being told by the bosses of major energy companies that the bills and the problems consumers will have by October of this year will be, and I quote, horrific, it's time something was done. And 25% could be taken off every single person and every company's electricity bill by getting rid of green subsidies. How, just how, do we make it happen? All of that in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Can it really be right to ban players from taking part in Wimbledon on the basis they were born in Russia or Belarus? I feel very uneasy about it indeed. Your reactions. One viewer says, of course it's right. Sanctions have to hit every aspect of Russian society to encourage them to stand up and get rid of Putin. OK, I get the logic of that. Please do tell that to the Germans, won't you? Who also, isn't it interesting, the Germans also, despite other world leaders all agreeing as the Battle of Donbass kicks off to help Ukraine with more military equipment, the Germans said no. Well, there you are. David says, Russian athletes, racing drivers, football teams, Olympic teams, etc., cannot be seen to be victorious because this will be used as pro-war propaganda. Well, if it was a national football team, contesting and winning the World Cup, I would understand the logic of that, but these are people who are representing themselves, just as Gary Player did as a South African golfer. But it was Gary Player that won the Masters, not South Africa. Pauline says, no, it's totally wrong. Jake says, yes, they've been banned from everything else. Please don't tell me there's grounds for a debate on this. I really think there is very, very serious grounds if we're starting to ban individuals because of their nationality, their religion, their race, or whatever else it may be. I think there are very serious grounds to have a good debate about this. Honestly, I do. Des says, disgraceful decision. I understand banning national teams from various sports, but how is it fair to ban individuals from competing? They have families to feed like everyone else. Green levies. Now, if this government, if Boris Johnson is in trouble over Partygate, and by the way, I think he'll be in rather more trouble over Partygate when the next fines come, as they are absolutely bound to. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get 2, 3 or 4 more fines. But the biggest problem the government faces, the biggest problem actually millions of folk in this country face, is rapidly rising energy bills. We talked about this yesterday. We looked at the testimony put before the parliamentary committee by the big energy bosses, already inundated with thousands of phone calls from decent customers saying, how on earth are we going to pay these bills? And I talked about what the government can actually do. Yes, the 5% VAT on our energy bills, which of course was a Brexit promise, could be removed. But the big one is the 25% surcharge on our electricity bills, which goes to renewable and social obligations. And I want to fight, I want to lobby, I want to campaign to get this removed. It would give great relief to those who are genuinely struggling here. Well, joining me is somebody who was a member of Parliament in the 1990s and a former chief executive of Energy UK. It's Angela Knight. Angela, good evening.
Good evening.
So my question to you is not so much whether we should perhaps, reconsider this 25% on the electricity bills. My question to you is, how do we get together a campaign of people to make the government shift its position?
And I think to get a campaign, you need to be absolutely clear what the campaign is about, Nigel.
Yep.
Is it about abandoning the whole going green agenda, or is it about the cost that individuals and companies are paying for in the levy on the bill? Because if it's abandon the green agenda, then that's one campaign. But I don't think that that's the right one, because in amongst all this green levy and all this, all this green levy and policy piece, there's also what we do about the next generation of electricity. And you and I have talked about this before. How do we make our whole system more self-sufficient? What do we do about getting on with building small nuclear and so forth? So in effect, I think that the way that I would look at it is not removing the green agenda and the self-sufficiency agenda and the insulation agenda, but I think very much, as you say, who pays, how much, and for what? If we are going to... Sorry.
No, I mean, you make the point there. I did make this point last night, that very, very few commentators, when they talk about these issues and talk about these costs, of course, bring in business. And we have made so many sections of heavy engineering, of refining, of aluminium production. We've made so many of our manufacturing companies simply close down and relocate that I'm absolutely with you. We mustn't forget business. But I don't think it's being anti the green agenda to say we shouldn't have, after decades of work, we shouldn't have to go on subsidising these things.
Now, that's a very good point. I do question whether we need to subsidise wind farms now to the way that we did in the past, number one. I do think that there's a case for putting a few more things on general taxation. And I do think that there's a case for bringing into play more private money when one is talking about building new generators and smaller generators and so on. And if I was in government, I mean, we all say this, don't we? If I was in government, what government needs to do is just stand back for a moment and have a think through what it is doing, what is the best way of doing it, how to finance things, what is reasonable for individuals and for business to pay, and indeed, should we actually just take a rain check on some of these levies for a period of 1 or 2 years? Because I don't think, whilst it's absolutely right to let's go and look at that green levy piece, but also on the bill now is paying for failed suppliers. Now, that's up at 60, 70, 80 pounds already. And there's a whole piece in there about networks, because, of course, you've got to get your gas and your electricity to us and to business. But a lot of that sits around the fact that we have to move the transmission in order to connect the new wind farms in. So there is something there that is more holistic. I think government needs to think about it. And I also think they need to be brave. it may well be that they come back, with a plan which says, yes, Nigel Farage, you're earning a decent amount of money as a presenter. You are going to have to pay more for your energy bill. But those people down the road who are really up to the wire, we're actually going to give them much more help. So there's a mixture of things here, but just carrying on, adding stuff on the bill, which we all pay, is regressive. And as you rightly point out, it's now a very real problem. And it is just part of this piece called energy, where the thinking needs to be done again. It's not in the right place at all.
Well, 25% on the electricity bill for renewable and social obligations, another 5% on the bill for VAT. And as you pointed out, actually, because of the difficulty of moving this power around the United Kingdom, other added costs. So we are looking into the 30% that are being added onto people's bills for all of this. One last thought. I know there are some businesses that are benefiting hugely from all of this, but I don't, even though I've spoken to refiners, I've spoken to metal bashers, I've spoken to so many people over the, and I worked in the metals industry, so I know a lot of these people. I've spoken to so many individual businesses who've been massively disadvantaged compared to France and Germany and especially America, let alone India and China. There's no concerted voice of business, is there, saying, for goodness sake, help us to become competitive, help us to create jobs, and that actually, if you export steel making from Redcar to India, there's no benefit for global CO2 either. Where are the voices? Where's the lobby?
I have been wondering that as well. I think you're quite right, because, I was going to chip in on you a moment ago. Most businesses have got a problem. A few haven't, but most have. And the competitiveness of the UK is vitally important. And of course, I'm one for bringing back more jobs and more industry into the UK, not sending more of it out worldwide. Your initial question to me was, how do we get a lobby going? Well, the first thing that you need with a good lobby is to have a plan of what you want the people you're lobbying to do, and that plan has got to be operational, it's got to be sensible, and it's got to be something that the government can actually implement. Because we're all very good at saying, I don't want that, I don't want to pay for that, why did you do this, why don't you do that? It's unfortunately isn't that easy. I wish it was. If it was easy, it would be done. So it is presenting a sensible alternative route, which may have, taking a rain check for a couple of years on certain agendas. And it's presenting that sensible route, which they can do, and marshalling up industry as well, which is the way that you create a good lobby. So carry on talking about it, and so will I.
Very good indeed. Angela, you can chip in any time. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Yeah, well, there's clearly more work to be done, and I think she put it rather well. Now, let's get to my What the Farage moments. Now, we know, don't we, that motor cars have changed incredibly in the last few years. I mean, the modern motor car, you've got parking sensors, you've got steering wheels that keep you within the white lines on the road. And of course, the plans are fairly shortly for driverless cars. There'll be a change to the highway code. When your car is in driverless mode and you've got no hands on the wheel, you'll be able to watch television as you're going along the motorway on built-in screens. These are new proposals to update the highway code, yet any use of mobile phones will remain illegal. I don't get the logic of that. Perhaps if somebody else does, they can explain it to me. I don't get it. Now, the cross-channel trafficking of human beings. It has gone up year after year after year. It's going up, actually, every year in multiples, isn't it? A couple of years back, it was just a few hundred. Then, of course, it became a couple of thousand. Then, of course, it became 8,500. Last year, it became a staggering 28,500. And this year to date, well, we're pushing right up to 7,000 people who've already been processed through that centre in Dover, let alone those that have got away. That rate that it's running at now is exactly 4 times what it was at this point last year. So if the current trend continues, we're looking at 100,000 people. Of course, maybe the Rwanda plan will happen, maybe it will get rolled out and act as a disincentive. I'm told again and again and again, these are poor, desperate people fleeing from not just poverty, but from war zones and from terrible things. And I must have been out a dozen times in my channel. I've met many of these people crossing face to face. And whilst I don't doubt that some sincerely and genuinely should qualify as refugees, what I've seen in many cases are just a group of young men who are coming for economic advantage. Have a look at these videos. These were taken 4 days ago by people coming from Afghanistan. And these videos, for those listening on radio, are basically glorifying the trip across the English Channel. They've added music to the videos. They're saying how fantastic it is. In fact, to be honest, the pictures these guys are posing, I say guys because they're all men, the pictures these guys are posing, I mean, it looks like they're on a day out. It looks like a works outing. It is up there on TikTok. It is glorifying crossing the English Channel. It is saying to people what a great option it is. And I guess there are 2 things really to say about that. Number 1, should social media channels be used to actually glorify what is a serious criminal trade with danger attacked? And secondly, you can tell me if you want that these are poor, desperate people, but I have to say, in many cases, they don't look like it to me. What of the ban of tennis players, men and women, from Belarus and from Russia, from Wimbledon? What say you? Daryl says, silly idea because it makes the West look petty. And did these people invade Ukraine? No. Another says, if it makes the Russian people question if what they're being told is the truth, then yes, it is right. Another says, politics has nothing to do with sports, so it's wrong to ban sportsmen on ideology and propaganda grounds. And lastly, Sylvia says, yes, it is right. Wimbledon is a private club and can ban anyone from playing if they want to. Well, Sylvia, you are, of course, right in saying that. It is a private club. They're not breaking any law. They can choose who enters their tournament or who doesn't. I just suggest that discriminating against people just on the basis of where they're born somehow takes us to a new place. I don't believe it's right. I've no doubt we'll talk about this again between now and Wimbledon. Now, continuing with the sporting theme, I'll be joined on Talking Pints by Lisa Mason, somebody who has competed for this country in the Olympics. We'll ask her what she makes of this ban.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's 2 questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GBNews.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The GB News Tavern has been declared open. Yes, it's Talking Pints time. Let's have a look, shall we? Let's have a look at tonight's guest, Lisa Mason, Olympic gymnast, gold medalist at the Commonwealth Games. And here she is in action in the 2015 British Gymnastics Championships. Well, welcome, Lisa Mason, to Talking Pints. I have to say, I sort of feel quite dizzy looking at that.
I still get nervous and butterflies when I watch myself compete, and it's really weird.
You, sport, it's in the news in a big, big way now. We're used, of course, aren't we, to, in the Olympics, in gymnastics, in all sorts of athletic events, we are used to endless doping scandals with the Russians, not to mention cycling. I mean, sport does have all these problems. But is it really? I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but clearly Russia and Belarus have got some seriously good men and women tennis players, you know, up there competing to win. Is it right to ban them as individuals? What do you think?
Personally, I don't think it is. I think that the decisions that are being made by the Russian government are decisions being made by the Russian government to discipline, I guess you would word it as, discipline these athletes for something that they're not doing, that they have openly disagreed with publicly. I don't think it's right. I'm sure there could be a loophole somewhere where, you know, they could compete unattached, if you will, not put the Russian flag there.
But it's not going to happen, is it? Because Wimbledon have made this decision. You know, the French Open haven't taken that decision.
Yeah.
I worry what precedent it may set. I mean, I really, really do. But sport, as I say, sport is always surrounded by controversy. It's really interesting. I've always sort of thought that young people getting involved in sport is a great thing. Not just it gets them off the streets, but it teaches them discipline. It teaches them they've got to get up in the morning and do things. And with you, gymnastics started very, very early, didn't it, in life?
It did. I started at 5. So, yeah, I was caught climbing on my house roof with my 3 brothers. So my mother needed to channel my energy somehow and put us all into gymnastics classes.
But you, from the age of 5, and as you're going through those developmental years, you weren't just doing gymnastics for fun, were you? You were doing gymnastics seriously, training.
Yeah, I think I got to the age of around 10, 11, and it was quite adamant that I had a talent. And within gymnastics, you know, especially back then, it was very much, you can only be a gymnast from a certain age. You know, once you're an adult, you can't be a gymnast because of the whole Nadia Comaneci thing and everyone looking at that and thinking, that's how you do it. And back in the day, that was how you did it. So it was very much, okay, so if you're going to do this and you're going to, you know, go for the Olympics and, you know, you need to come out of school and you need to live with your coaches and you need to train 6 days a week, 8 hours a day and, you know, not have a childhood and not see your friends. And
so how much pressure were you put under?
The thing is hard. I was a kid, so I wouldn't really look at it as pressure so much. I think I was very conscious of the fact that I realised how much my family had sacrificed and were sacrificing, not just my mum and my dad, but my brothers also, you know. There were things that they wanted to do and a lot of the time they couldn't do it because I had a gymnastics competition, for instance. So I think there was this conscious thought in the back of my head, like, you can't just quit, you know, because everyone's relying on you now.
Is it good to put kids under that much? Is it good to put 10-year-old kids under that level of pressure and expectation?
I think this is where I've always kind of had the disagreement with, especially in diving and gymnastics, more so because they're the only sports that allow 15-year-olds to compete at the Olympic Games. And I do think it's too much pressure. And there's a big difference between, you know, training a child and putting fear in them to do something because they're not old enough to understand it. So you're putting pressure on them to do something you know that they can do. But ultimately, when you're an adult, you understand it. You understand that you've got to put in the work in order to get a result. And I don't think it's fair you're putting all this pressure on these children.
You know, they put you as a kid on prescription drugs.
Yes, ultimately, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't question it because it's very much like, OK, well, this hurts. OK, we'll go see the team doctor and they will just give you a nice little bright yellow pills.
And as long as those pills don't break the rules...
Yeah. This is it. But,
these are quite troubling questions, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, my first time round, it was very different. Things were very different back then. Unfortunately, especially with the whole Gymnastics Alliance, you know, it was very real that the fact that these kind of predators and this abuse did and was very much still, and it still is around in gymnastics and...
Other sports too.
Absolutely, other sports as well. So it's very difficult because this all coming out and, you know, exposing a lot, and a lot of it is about re-educating people. And I do believe that people can change. And like I said, when you're brought up in an environment where you're taught that this is the only way to do it, if it's not broke, don't fix it. You have to re-educate people to say, well, actually, you know, maybe screaming at them and sitting on a 10-year-old to push them down into spits is not the best idea.
No, there are quite... However, with you, it kind of worked because you went on, you got to where you wanted to get to, you took part in the Olympics, you took part Commonwealth Games, World Championships. I guess, was the highlight the Commonwealth Games?
Do you know what? Yeah, Commonwealth Games was so much more fun than the Olympics. I think because, obviously, the Olympics is so many more countries and you've got, like, the likes of America and China and things like that. Commonwealth Games is a little bit more relaxed and I actually went in there and I won my gold medal on an event that I really wasn't supposed to win on. I messed up on the event I could have quite easily walked and won that. But, yeah, so it was nice because I was so shocked I didn't even think that I'd make the final, so to win the gold.
There we are, more clips, you see, as we speak. No, I mean, obviously that's fantastic, and, you know, all that tough stuff you went through as a kid, but you got somewhere, you achieved things, and incredibly, you retired age 19.
18.
18. I said, it just seems incredible. So that's it, you washed up, you finished.
Well, it was basically, I mean, that was the mindset back then. It was very rare for a gymnast to do more than one Olympics. It was the mindset of if you've got a woman's body, you're no longer good enough, you know, and that's definitely changing now. And like I said, knowledge is power. And
you must have felt very empty.
Yeah, I think I was just very lost, I think, you know, and it's kind of, you give your life and your soul, your blood, your sweat, your tears to a federation that's supposed to protect you. And, you know, they make you leave school.
And you're retired before you're an adult.
And then it's kind of like, thank you for everything you've done.
Yeah.
Sort of and live a normal life, you know, so...
Very difficult.
Yeah.
But then you decided to make a comeback.
I did. Just wanted to rustle some feathers because everyone was telling me I couldn't. And I was like, I can.
Yeah, and some of those clips we saw were from as recently as 2015. So you've really come back to it and continued with it. I want to ask you this question. You know, if you spoke to some parents today and they had a 5-year-old daughter, just as you were, who clearly had an aptitude, would you recommend they push their daughter hard in gymnastics?
I don't think it's a case of pushing your daughter hard. I have always been one of these people where I'm like, gymnastics for kids is great and it's a fundamental sport to put a child into any other sport. It teaches you core stability, balance, coordination, discipline in the sense of concentrating and listening to direction. It's a great first sport for a lot of children. I would always say there's no rush. You know, you don't have to be 8 and doing all these hours. And I think COVID happening definitely opened the eyes to a lot of gymnasts and coaches, because, you know, you having a week off as a gymnast was an absolute no. You know, you might as well retire. Whereas now they're actually realising with the right training, the right support, that you can continue and do high-level gymnastics.
I think you could argue that Joe Wick's got many of the youngsters of the nation actually exercising and doing things.
He definitely, I love Joe.
Which is no bad. No, it was good, wasn't it?
He's fantastic. I had my kids doing some of these workouts as well. So.
Do you think schools teach this stuff well? Do schools do gymnastics well?
No. I mean, I go in. I teach after school clubs in schools, so that's what I do. I think it's very difficult for schools to have the knowledge to teach gymnastics because there's a lot to cover. You don't have to know everything. I think they have so much pressure on them as teachers anyway to try and teach somebody how to roll and jump and coordinate.
I was terrible at it.
I'm sure you wasn't.
No, I was good at some sports, but I did find it very, very difficult. And the biggest controversy, though, of sport, a female sport, it's not Wimbledon. You know what it is. Mm-hmm. It's this whole debate about transgender athletes and, you know, you can test hormone levels and you can do all those things, but clearly, in the case of Leah Thomas, the swimmer, the American swimmer, there's somebody who is 6'3", who has been through male puberty, who has bigger bone structure, who was ranked in men's swimming, I think I'm right in saying 454th in the world, and is now winning everything. And I'm sensing there is now a bit of pushback against this. Because I don't know, Lisa, how you feel about this, but I mean, what is the future of women's sport if people like Leah Thomas are allowed to compete? Where's the incentive for young girls to do what you did?
I think... I mean, I'm not very knowledgeable on, you know, the science behind it, the facts, but what I know is if a woman wanted to adapt her hormone level to be faster and stronger, she would have her medals taken from her and kicked out of the sport.
Yeah.
Naturally, men are faster and stronger. And even if you're taking hormones to reduce that, you're still going to be faster and stronger than women, as the results from the swimmer is showing. I don't think you're going to have many women that will identify as men competing in the men category for, I mean, obvious reasons.
Well, there might be one or two, but...
There might be one or two, but the likeliness of you being the best... Again, this is from my...
So what do we do?
I think they should be allowed to compete. I think that, you know, there should just be a category. Their own category. And I think you have women's, you have men's, and you can have trans for men and trans for women. I think there should, you know, it should be a even and fair field to play in. But then you have to have enough for everyone to compete.
I'm going to say, I mean, if there are huge numbers of entrants for male and female categories, and about 3 people enter.
Exactly, so that's the difficulty, because as the Olympics...
And to give that gold medal equivalence, listen, I don't know what the perfect answer is.
Exactly.
But it is a threat to women's sport, isn't it?
I mean, ultimately, yes. And I just don't think, unless the only way you're going to kind of level the playing field is if you allow, I believe, women to be taking something that can enhance their performance to level it out. And
that's about the last thing we want to do,
exactly,
isn't it, really?
Because as an athlete, we all know that that's not right and that's not fair. So.
Sporting controversies will go on and on and on. And I want to say thank you, Lisa, for joining me on Talking Pints. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers. We are coming towards the end of the programme. It is time for Barrage the Farage, where you send your questions in. And, of course, my guest every evening tends to get as many questions fired at them. So here goes. Question number 1, Sophie asks, Lisa, what would your advice be to aspiring gymnasts of today? What's the one big piece of advice you'd give?
Enjoy it. Feel it.
Enjoy it. I like
Just
that.
feel it. Stop putting pressure on yourself to perform. Enjoy the freedom of being able to literally fly. to learn something, to do something that there are a lot of people who cannot do.
Enjoy it, smile. I like that. That's good. Mike asks, sport is riddled with drug abuse, but how can it be stopped? Well, they keep trying to stop it by banning people and banning countries. But the trouble is, you know, Lisa, you were put on drugs, but they were legal drugs, weren't they?
Yeah, painkillers, yeah.
But it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean...
Will we ever end drug abuse in sport?
I don't think you're going to ever end drug abuse in everyday life, let alone in sports.
Good answer. Good answer. Quick, sharp, I like that. Daniel asks, will Boris survive Partygate? Well, I did describe it last night, that the fine that he had last week was like your first speeding offence. It's 3 points on your licence. When you get to 12 points, you get banned. I am certain... Here we are, putting my neck on my light. I like doing this. I am certain that Boris will receive more fines, and I say that in plural. He is going to get 2, 3, 4 more fines. And I think with each of them that comes, a level of confidence in him drops. I'm not saying that Partygate should end his career, but it's damaging his reputation with the British people. And hey, he's got other more important things to deal with, like the cost of living. I think he's in real trouble. May the 5th, the local elections will decide. One viewer asks me, does Biden know what planet he's on? No, he doesn't. He doesn't, and he's dangerous. He said things when he visited Ukraine that, frankly, were mad, telling American troops they would be in Ukraine soon, saying we would respond like with like to any chemical attacks that were launched. He isn't just a doddery old duffer. He's a danger to world peace. They really should move the 25th Amendment and get rid of him as US President on the grounds he is not up to the job. There we are. That's a clear opinion for you, isn't it? That's enough from me this evening. Be back with you tomorrow. Mark Stein joins you in a few moments. First, though, let's have a look at the weather.
Hello, I'm Luke Meyer with your weather forecast. And for the next few days, we've got a lot of dry weather around across the UK. There will be some sunshine from time to time, but we will start to see the risk of some showers across the south. With high pressure over Scandinavia, that's keeping our weather fairly settled across the UK at the moment, keeping these weather fronts out towards the west at bay. They're not the ones to worry about, but we may see some showers developing from the south as we go in towards the weekend. But for the rest of Wednesday night and into Thursday, a lot of clear skies across the country, so a chilly night to come. Could be a touch of frost, particularly for sheltered parts of Scotland. And across eastern Scotland, we will also see some low cloud and haar drifting in from the North Sea. Temperatures 2 to 5 as we start the day on Thursday. But for many of us, it's a bright and sunny start. Any early morning mist or fog should clear away fairly quickly. And then a lot of sunshine across the UK through Thursday. Away from that is that North Sea coast, particularly northeast England, southeast Scotland, where we could see some low cloud. Now, there will be a bit more cloud across the southwest and across Wales through the afternoon, but in any sunshine, still likely to see temperatures 18 degrees Celsius, but as I say, cooler on that east coast as we begin to see a bit more of an easterly breeze feeding in. Now, that's going to become more of a feature of our weather over the next few days. Through Thursday night, it will drag in a lot more low cloud across eastern parts of England and Scotland, so fairly grey, fairly misty in places as we start the day on Friday. The best of any clearer skies will be out towards the west, but with more breeze and more cloud, temperatures won't be quite as low as we start Friday morning. So not as chilly first thing, but you will have the added impact of that wind. Cloud will be thick enough at times across southern areas to give 1 or 2 showers from time to time, so less in the way of sunshine here. I think the best of the sunshine will be further north, particularly northwest Scotland, having the lion's share of the sunshine here. Now, it stays fairly mixed in towards the weekend, dry for most, a few showers across the south, and those temperatures just trending down slightly. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can.